Right now, somewhere in the world, a horse is standing in a field, doing absolutely nothing. Grazing, swatting flies with its tail, waiting for someone to bring it dinner. It looks tame, domesticated into irrelevance. A pet for people who like to wear boots. But that animal in the field is a lie. Or rather, it's a disguise. Because that same creature, 4,000 years ago, was the reason your ancestors either survived the winter or didn't. It was the reason entire cities were built, and the reason entire cities were burned to the ground. It moved gold across deserts, moved armies across continents, and moved the entire human species out of the Stone Age and into something we might call civilization. Here's the claim this video is going to make, and it's going to sound insane at first. The horse did more to build the modern world than gunpowder, than the wheel, than almost any invention you were taught about in school. Without it, there is no Roman Empire, no Mongol Empire, no conquest of the Americas, no agricultural surplus that let humans stop farming and start building libraries, temples, and cities. We think of horses as background scenery in history, something kings sat on top of while the real history happened. That's backwards. The horse wasn't the throne. The horse was the empire. By the end of this video, you will never look at that quiet animal in the field the same way again. To find the horse's origin, you have to go to one of the loneliest landscapes on Earth, the Eurasian steppe. A grassland so enormous it swallows entire countries, flat, windswept, and almost featureless, stretching over 5,000 miles from the Danube to the Pacific. This wasn't a jungle bursting with resources. It was a hard, unforgiving expanse where survival meant mastering speed and endurance. And it was here, roughly 5,500 years ago, near modern-day northern Kazakhstan, that a Copper Age people called the Botai culture did something no one had ever done before. They didn't just hunt the wild horses that roamed the steppe. They caught them, fed them, bred them, climbed onto their backs. We know this not from legend, but from bone. Archaeologists studying Botai horse remains found telltale wear patterns on the teeth, the same damage caused by a bit, thousands of years before metal bits existed. They found pottery shards laced with the fatty residue of mare's milk. This wasn't a wild animal being eaten. This was an animal being managed. And once a Botai rider climbed onto a horse's back for the first time, something happened that had never happened before in the history of our species. A human being could suddenly move faster than their own legs would ever allow. Faster than a wolf. Faster than danger. Faster than starvation. But before the horse became a tool, it was something closer to a god. Across nearly every early culture that encountered it, the horse was treated not as property, but as sacred. In the burial mounds of the steppe, archaeologists have unearthed human chieftains buried alongside dozens of horses, animals sacrificed and interred so their owner could ride into the afterlife with the same status he held in life. In later Indo-European traditions, the horse was so bound up with kingship and divinity that royal coronation rites literally required a symbolic, and sometimes very real, union between the ruler and a horse, cementing the animal's role as a conduit between mortal power and the divine. The Greeks gave the horse a god-tier upgrade too. Poseidon, ruler of the seas and earthquakes, was also worshipped as the creator of the horse itself, proof that early civilizations couldn't quite believe something so powerful was merely an animal. So what was the spark? What turned a grazing prey animal into an object of worship and obsession? It was speed matched with strength, a combination no other domesticable animal on the planet offered. Cattle were strong, but slow. Dogs were fast, but weak. The horse alone could carry a grown man at nearly 30 miles per hour, for hours, across terrain that would break a human's legs and spirit. In a world where the difference between life and death was often measured in how fast you could reach or flee, the horse wasn't just useful. It was a superpower with a heartbeat. Around 2000 BCE, someone on the steppe made a discovery that would rewrite the rules of warfare for the next 3,000 years. The spoked wheel, paired with a horse, created the war chariot. Suddenly, a two-man team, driver and archer, could outmaneuver, outrun, and outgun any foot soldier on Earth. Chariot-riding warriors swept from the steppe into Mesopotamia, into Egypt, into the Indus Valley, carrying not just weapons but an entirely new language family with them. Linguists now believe the spread of Indo-European languages, the ancestor of English, Spanish, Hindi, Russian, and dozens more, rode on horseback out of the steppe and across 2 continents. But if you want to see the horse's true empire-building power at its most terrifying, you go to the 13th century, and you go to one man, Genghis Khan. The Mongols didn't have gunpowder cannons. They didn't have massive walled fortresses or naval fleets. What they had was horses, and an entire civilization built around riding them from childhood. Mongol warriors could fire arrows accurately at a full gallop, switch mounts mid-campaign to maintain blistering speed, and cover up to 100 miles in a single day. A logistical feat European and Chinese armies simply could not comprehend, let alone counter. The result, the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Roughly 9 million square miles, stretching from Korea to Hungary. Built not on steel, but on stamina. The horse didn't support the Mongol Empire. The horse was the Mongol Empire. But for every empire the horse built, it helped tear another one down. And this is where its story turns dark. When Spanish conquistadors landed in the Americas in the 1500s, they brought something the continent had never seen: mounted cavalry. Indigenous civilizations, the Aztec and Inca among them, had never encountered horses, and the psychological shock of mounted, armored soldiers contributed directly to the swift, brutal collapse of empires that had thrived for centuries. Historians widely regard the horse as one of the conquistadors' single greatest military advantages during the conquest of the Americas. And the horse's economic footprint had a darker side still. Across the transatlantic slave trade, horses were used to run plantations, capture and control enslaved people, and expand colonial territory deeper into captured land. In parts of West and Central Africa, horses themselves became instruments and prizes of conflict. Warlords who controlled horse populations controlled raiding power, and raiding power fed directly into the machinery of the slave trade. Even among nations that never fully industrialized the horse for combat, it remained, for centuries, one of the most fought-over resources on Earth. Wars were launched to seize enemy horse stock. Entire economies, from Arabia to the American plains, organized themselves around horse breeding, horse theft, and horse warfare. Some historians have gone so far as to call the horse the world's first weapon of mass mobility, more decisive, in its era, than any single blade or bow. And then, slowly, the pivot began. What started as a weapon reserved for kings, chieftains, and elite cavalry became something else entirely: infrastructure. Along the Silk Road, horses, and their hardier cousins, mules, hauled silk, spices, gunpowder, and ideas between China, Persia, and Europe. Postal relay systems, the Mongol Yam, the Persian Royal Road, the Pony Express centuries later, used horses as the internet of their day, carrying messages faster than any technology before the telegraph. The horse had gone from sacred animal to war machine to something almost mundane, the fastest delivery system human beings had ever built. If the horse built empires through conquest, it built civilization itself through something far less glamorous: farming. The invention of the horse collar in medieval Europe, a piece of equipment that seems almost laughably simple, may be one of the most underrated breakthroughs in human history. Earlier harnesses choked a horse if it pulled too hard, capping its usefulness. The horse collar redistributed the load onto the animal's shoulders, allowing horses to pull plows far more efficiently than oxen. The result was a dramatic expansion of farmable land across Europe, larger food surpluses, population growth, and, many historians argue, the economic foundation that allowed medieval towns to grow into the cities that would eventually fuel the Renaissance. In other words, before Europe could have philosophers, painters, and printing presses, it needed full stomachs. And it was the horse, dragging a plow through cold northern soil, that helped make that possible. For nearly the entirety of recorded human history, every revolution, every war, every empire, every wedding procession and royal funeral moved at the speed of a horse. Napoleon's armies, the American frontier, the postal systems that connected continents. For roughly 5,000 years, there was no faster way to move a human being or a heavy object across land. Then, in the span of about 50 years, the horse was almost entirely replaced. The automobile, the railway, and mechanized farm equipment arrived, and the animal that had defined nearly every empire in human history was suddenly obsolete as a technology. So what is the horse now? It's a paradox. In wealthy nations, the horse has been almost entirely rebranded, from empire-building machine to luxury companion, sport athlete, and therapy animal. The global equestrian and horse racing industry alone is worth tens of billions of dollars annually. A sweet force of leisure and status that has almost nothing to do with its original purpose. Meanwhile, truly wild horse populations, like the American Mustang, are now so rare and politically contested that governments spend millions managing and protecting the descendants of an animal that once helped conquer entire continents. And there's a final twist worth noting. Modern breeding science has taken the horse's ancient power and engineered it further. Selective breeding for thoroughbred racehorses has produced animals capable of speeds their Ice Age ancestors never approached, a form of genetic manipulation humans have been quietly running for centuries, long before we had a word for genetics at all. In a strange way, the horse we breed for the racetrack today is the same story as the horse bred for war on the steppe 5 millennia ago. Humans, endlessly refining an animal's power for their own purposes. We're taught that history is a story of kings, of wars, of inventions with names we can put on a timeline. But underneath almost every major turn in human history, every empire that rose, every civilization that expanded, every surplus of food that let humans stop surviving and start creating, there's hoofbeats. The horse carried the warriors who built the largest empire on earth. It carried the conquistadors who ended civilizations that had lasted 1,000 years. It pulled the plows that fed the cities that gave us art, philosophy, and government. It was worshipped as a god, weaponized as a war machine, and eventually retired into the quiet pasture where we started this video. So the next time you see a horse standing in a field, doing what looks like nothing, remember what that same animal used to do. It built your language. It built your cities. It built, quite literally, the world you're standing in right now. If this made you see something ordinary in a completely new way, that's exactly what this channel is about. The hidden history behind the things we take for granted. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.